Hi, I picked the wrong day to have an epiphany. It's I look very different, don't I? You can actually compare my face to when I first started this channel. I've lost a lot of weight now. I picked the wrong day to have an epiphany. I decided I wanted to scare my cashiers a little bit, just give them a little startle. What the heck? Really worked on one of them, the one I know I scared last time I did it, which is funny because I think I need to scare her a little bit anyways. And the other guys were a little freaked out, but they just went with it, and it was funny. Um, I was completely clean shaven. The stubble didn't exist. It was crisp. It was clean. Um, so I had this really interesting epiphany, and this is going to piss off. I'm gonna say this now. This pisses off both. This pisses off, I think, every denomination in Christianity. And this is why, this is the disconnect that people have that allows the church to lose participation. And it is this, and it's weird if you aren't prepared for it. The claim that God is fully human as Christ is it has to be correct. So here's my claim, and I'm gonna have to actually I'm gonna actually have to create a few small integrations. I'm gonna have to create a little bit of a story, and people are allowed to disagree with it. So to start off with, I think from Judges to Job was probably written before Genesis to Deuteronomy. I'm going to make that claim first. And why I say that is because the language structure is less sophisticated. These were more closer to recorded stories than divinely inspired myths. And I don't mean that to be said in a wrong way, because I think that myths are true deeper than material reality. And this should be, I know this sounds crazy coming from someone who has a bachelor's of science in biology. And like, no, because I will eventually get around to painting that picture, and that picture you can actually just like understand it by watching the conversation that Jonathan Peugeot and Peter Boghossian had. It took Peter Boghossian a long time to understand the process to get to Jonathan Peugeot's belief system, because it's not traditional angry old crotchety man in the sky mad. It's way more sophisticated than that. So here's the thing. I think the sophistication in writing of the Pentateuch, actually the first four books of the Bible, especially the beginning of Genesis, is way more sophisticated than, like, it loses sophistication, then it picks it back up. Around Job is the turning point. So, and there's a reason why I'm saying this. So as you can tell, like, it feels like God is different in, let's say, Judges than he is in later in Daniel, and he is different later in Matthew, and then he seems very similar, but he seems very similar to Matthew as he is in Revelation. Um, so here's my first claim. As a individual human develops themselves, they are barely aware that they're making decisions. Like you actually have to kind of tease it out that, hey, your body, you're making decisions based on impulse, and that's not the correct way to approach life. And that disconnect between your body's impulses and your decisions is the first step to human development. It's the bridge that gets crossed. I think it's the first bridge that gets crossed that Jordan Peterson and most developmental psychologists claims, like right around 4, where they start testing for delayed gratification. And actually, here's the thing: that study, because it's repeatable, but I think it tests the wrong thing. It tests trust. So anyways, back to the idea. There's a cross between your body's impulses telling you to do things and your personhood making decisions. Because this happens sometimes where you let your body get the best of you, where you're trying to fast, and if you're inexperienced at it, you're just gonna fail. Because the solution is actually to, how do I put this? I'm trying to re-enter a fast. I really suck at it. I did it the first year. I dropped 5 pounds. I am going to try to do it again. The solution is to start slowly telling yourself no to things, to interrupt yourself, to create distance from the things that your body's going to reach for. My standard choice for pleasure tends to be pastries. Cookies are a big one for me. However, that's slowly losing its pleasureness. And in fact, I had some cookies today. Some of the the icing covered cookies from Kroger. My body was giving me feel good stuff, but my taste buds weren't. In fact, they were tasting chemically from the icing because of all the food dye in there. Back to where I was coming from. The early God was impulsive, and he was giving a lot of demands, and he had a law, and he was jealous. So if you can imagine, if you can imagine a 10-year-old with a pet, just for a few minutes, you think, like, they say no, yes, no, no, no. They try to tell the thing, don't do these things. As you get older, you understand that the pet has agency also. And you start to see its theory of mind, just as like you see your theory of mind. It is, I think, in that way that God in Job has a change. In fact, I'm pretty sure Job was written before Genesis. Let that sink in for a little bit. I'm pretty sure Job was written before Genesis. That does not mean we put it before Genesis in the Bible, but it does mean that we need to take into consideration how God is perceived. Because I think God, if you look at him just through the current structure of the Bible, it's one of the flaws that we have with a 2-dimensional book. Like yes, 3-dimensional, but like you can't like layer the stories beside each other. You can't say, well, read this first, and then read this, and then read this, when one of them has chronological importance. Like we did that with Star Wars. I don't think they had that idea originally. We actually did that with Teen Titans. I don't think they had that idea originally. No, because no one thought just jump right in with your cultural history and then go and develop your your origin of reality story. Um, that is actually a very Western thing to do. So I think if I were to make my own Bible, I would actually put the first four books of the Bible, I'd shuffle them up to right after Job. I know that sounds funny, but they were put there based on the wisdom of men, and now after 3,000 years, 4,000 years, something like that. Wait, yeah, something like 3 to 4,000 years. We've we've innovated. We've found that it is acceptable to change the presentation um, of things that happen in time to when you need to put them in. My language is poor here. It's 1:30 a.m. Shh. I shouldn't be up and moving and having these ideas. I should go to sleep. So, anyways, I think that my claim is that God is a developing human being. You should treat him like one. Um, God is fully human, and therefore, like when he actually manifests himself on the world, or in reality as Jesus Christ, we should have understood. Like that should have been like a groundbreaking idea, and we just didn't run with it enough. Um, I think like you should see, like we should see God as a developing human, and in fact, we should understand, like how do I put this? I'm pretty sure it's Matthew 4, where Jesus walks out into the wilderness and is tempted by Satan. If you don't understand what my claim actually entails that Satan is a part of God. He is like the human urges that control an immature child that is being raised up to be a full man in and of himself. So actually, the the first claim you have to make is that in order to completely develop yourself as a human being, you have to be able to overcome your basal urges. Um, the best way to do that is to start by fasting, because that gets rid of, like, you have to overcome hunger in order to do that. And it's not just hunger. If you are bigger like me, you can actually, if you're drinking enough water and enough salts, you can actually just not eat for a couple days, and like you'll have like 1 or 2 days where you're tired, but you can go like 10, 12, 14 days without eating. Um, because your body just naturally produces the if you have the fat on you, it just naturally produces the necessary metabolic amino acids that you need, and it just naturally produces all that stuff. Not to mention it has a massive backflow of them too. Like you better have, like, your body behaves like you'd better have all these things in a little bit of excess in case a few of them come out junk when you need to replace the old ones. Um, yeah, so like you can actually fast for a couple days, and like this is actually how Christians have been. Um, I'm gonna say they've been harmonizing with God because, like, this is an easy way to explain that. Part of the feeling of fasting is a deep source of meaning you get. There's actually a deep source of meaning when you just tell yourself no over and over and over again. If you can manage to fight your body that much. Um. Anyways, So my claim actually functions really well because yes, God would immaturely start wars, would have his people start wars and say, go exterminate these people, they are vile. When instead, the more, like, as you develop, you realize, well, there's always going to be vile people. And you can't just kill them all. I mean, God could, and that is not acceptable. Like, as a child, you could say, yeah, just go over and kill them, and then we get into Iraq. But as an adult, you say, um, yeah, they're committing atrocities. Um, First of all, create a boundary. Do not let them come in. Do not facilitate any of their transactions. You can pressure other countries to stop facilitating what they're doing. And then you can start to, once they start starving, because they're in a desert, they don't, and they're not, they've, the elites have stripped away the populace's ability to produce their own food via information starvation and crippling their own people's ability to discover methods of creating their own resources. They've taken away their ingenuity by creating a hierarchical system that rewards family connection, and it's just entirely social instead of facilitating the upraising of competent people and rewarding them. I know I'm off base, but it's going to come back around. Where was I? When you reward people for not being competent but for knowing the right people, your society just collapses. Which is what's happening in America, by the way. We've lost competence. But there's other things we've also lost. We've lost a lot of morality. That's beside the point. God is capable of doing evil things when he has yet to develop as a human being. So actually, my claim is that as above, so below, we are microcosms of God, and even though reality is cold and hard and creates a lot of suffering, the solution is to embrace it and learn from it, and to write stories and live lives such that you can shape the origin story of your people and of your God such that you can give it the correct trajectory to this is probably sounding a lot like Marx. I don't like that part, but like this is like you have to understand the undercurrent here. There's because humans are narrative driven, like it's completely narrative driven. From top to bottom, your sounds serve a purpose, which it serves your language, and your language serves a purpose, which is to plant your ideas in other people's heads. So that way they can either incorporate them or combat them or chop them up and combat certain parts I don't like and agree with certain parts I do like, but you get the idea. Everything has purpose, and the ultimate purpose of everything is God. And that means the ultimate purpose of everything is to. This sounds progressive, but it's not actually. It's to experiment a little bit on the fringes, and on the fringes is where changes happen. You can incorporate things a little bit, and then when they're bad, you kick them out. But when it's good to incorporate them with a little bit of wisdom. You can take what you need from them and pull them in, and carefully watch what changes within you. And this is actually a really important job, and this is where humans are. We are like the membrane between the material realm and the divine. I think that's the best way to explain it. The human is the membrane between the material and the divine. And like that is at a like I know that sounds really mystic, but like if you can start applying biological principles to something that has fourth, fifth, and sixth and seventh dimensionality, why not? Because as above, so below. I'm not gonna say as below, so above. I think though this is like the dialogue here. I think we're intentionally on the fringe, specifically so that way God can develop by watching us, like how we develop by reading stories of the past, and like how we develop by interacting with the world around us and by seeing the narratives and living out our I am such that God can, how do I put this? So that way God can develop himself too. As we develop ourselves, God develops up with us. I think technically you can say that the Holy Spirit is the spirit that moves you when you are in communion with God. That's not perfect, but this is a completely different idea from Orthodox Christianity, or this is just a completely different idea from most Christianity. To say that God is completely human, most people don't understand that. Like, yes, God came in as Christ, but they're not going to tie all the strings together. That yeah, God is completely human. Um, and that just is going to blow everyone's mind, because then you can start doing biology there. You can start doing, like, I know this sounds crazy, but you can start using biological research on the material and try to apply it upwards and see where it goes. And you can start having these theoretical ideas, and it actually, like, this is how religions form, right? By the way, I I'll eventually make a video about it, but I'm pretty certain that um like yeah, I'm pretty certain that I'll wait. But I'm fairly certain that we can start applying um physical property sciences like yeah, I'll do physics, chemistry, biology. We can start using that language to describe up. And this sounds like alchemy, but alchemy already happened and we got chemistry out of it. And chemistry actually applied to the world. It had direct changes. And I think if you start using chemical language, you can describe things above also, because it comes from the top down. So the patterns you see around you down here also have patterns up there. Now, the patterns up there are going to have they're going to be way more intricate. They're going to have way more going on. They're going to be way more hyper connected than down here, but that's okay. If you can start with language down here, you can go up.